Alrighty, guys. So continuing on our little talk about the question of how do you prevent some of these things. We talked last time about foster care prevention and some of our amazing efforts for foster care. When it comes to human trafficking, we have quite a thrust going for human trafficking prevention. It's not quite the same as foster care. We tried to do prevention in a number of different ways. We tried like an actual site that did education, equipped youth, and I think we had some success doing that. We tried in all of our like education type things to get into the schools, and that was always very difficult for us as a parachurch organization to get into schools and talk about sex and crazy stuff for kids. And then what we realized is that over the years, other groups, government groups, did it far better than we were, and they had permission to get into the schools. And so we gave that a try for a while, and really tried to prevent it that way through awareness, campaigns, and different things. But awareness, it seemed like other people were doing it better. So let's find a need and fill it. So what is the need? And so at least here in Phoenix and Arizona, there was great need 10 years ago to change our laws, to make the penalties for the Johns, the buyers, and the traffickers much more severe, because in some of our cities here in Arizona, it was like a $40 fine to have sex with a minor, and then you could always say, I didn't know how old she was. Like that was a legitimate, like lawyers were using that, And so this our prevention efforts for human trafficking really bleed into another video we have for government task force work. But essentially it was this. We started to, as we gained some favor in the community here, we started to get the notice of some politicians. And politicians, I will say that they, when it's election time especially, boy, they're looking to attach themselves to just about any good cause they can to get more votes. And I genuinely, legitimately believe many of them do care, but a lot of them are just with you until they get elected, and then they're gone. Can't ever get a hold of them again. But some of them really stick with you for the fight. And two of those for us were our Attorney General, or State Attorney General, and one of our senators' wives, Cindy McCain, and then Mark Bronovic. And they've been dear friends of mine and the Dream Centers for many years now. But it was through their coming up through politics that we were able to say, okay, let's tackle some of these legislative issues that we're seeing. We need to make the fines more and harsher and stricter, but we also need to make it palatable for law enforcement to do the arrest. Because law enforcement, a lot of times they're picking up guys, traffickers or Johns, and because there really was no robust mandatory booking law or anything, they kind of were turning them off with a fine, and they'd never see court, they'd never see anything. And so how we worked prevention at the state level there was through a governor's task force. And I know that sounds probably to most of you like the farthest thing from your wheelhouse and your ability to get something like that going, but and it was mine as well. I'd never done anything like that before, and was quite frankly scared to death and didn't have the time. I was like, I don't have the time for even what I'm doing now, like let alone starting a task force and doing stuff. But you see these kids and you work with these kids, and you're like, man, the guys doing this to them are basically getting off scot-free. Like somebody's got to be a voice for these kids, right? And so very graciously we lobbied the then governor Jan Brewer and others, and said, hey, this is a across the aisle, non-partisan issue. This is Arizona's kids that are at stake here, and honestly, these are pretty antiquated laws we have for men who are basically raping children in our community, but there's no teeth to the law. So we started our first task force. It started as a task force. We used a lot of data from Shared Hope International and other national places. Shared Hope does a state report card, so check out your state's report card for human trafficking through Shared Hope International. And these are all things that you can take to your government folks and say, hey, we're weak in this area, we're strong in this area, but we're weak in this area. And we really feel that if we had a task force with yourself, Governor, as an honorary appointee, and others, that we'll be able to make these legislative changes. And so on this task force, we had the heads of our state for Department of Child Safety, for law enforcement, for the FBI, for healthcare, for service providers, which was the Dream Center. And so we brought everybody to the table, all the service providers to the table, and just started to go down this road. We need more awareness for police. This was 10 years ago. So police were arresting juveniles and locking them up because they felt like that was the safest option. And the mindset was, it's just a runaway youth, it's a runaway teenage girl. Nobody was asking why she was running away or what she was running away from, so started the task force with that. I'm very proud to say that over the years we've changed dozens of laws, and we have made it a no-go zone here in Arizona for traffickers. Every month a huge raid happens with law enforcement, and dozens of girls set free nearly every month. That happens. We just took in 6 girls over the last week at our shelter for minors. It has changed. It has changed. The tone has changed in Arizona. It's not acceptable. It's not. It is seen as high crime for anyone to abuse kids or young women in this area. So our prevention efforts in the area of human trafficking were not quite like our efforts for foster care, but they were more on the legislative side. We needed to stiffen up the laws for the offenders, and we needed to get rid of old antiquated language like prostitute and all these things that were in the language from before, just to make the law even and the judges more aware that, because that word prostitute had this stigma associated with it of, wow, they're doing it themselves and they want to do it, but you talk to them and we don't see them doing it of their own volition. So that's how we do prevention. We're still doing the other awareness efforts to a degree, going and speaking to youth groups, doing tours at the Dream Center and at our other campuses. But we shifted our major prevention efforts toward the area of state legislative, changing the law. I will say that I mentioned that it was tough to get into schools, and so the way that we're addressing that is through the legislative. So the schools are all run by ARS, Arizona Revised Statutes, and so we've started to go after those statutes, and wherein sexual violence is a mandatory topic in school, and drug awareness is a mandatory topic in school. We're lobbying now, and we're getting bipartisan support. We're almost there to make it a law that you have to teach about sex trafficking in schools. And so we're excited about what God's going to do in the future. That'll be a real, I think, cherry on top to have the schools all mandatory be talking about it. That's how we do prevention. Hope that's been helpful. God bless you guys. Bye-bye.